Hey guys, how's it going? I am Danconia and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup. So we've had week 2 of the Overwatch League Stage 4 and we are now on a roll. We are getting real close to those playoffs and suddenly we've got some roster changes for the London Spitfire. Now, as you may remember, London Spitfire came into this league as two teams basically. They were GC Busan and Gyeongju Panthera from Korea. The two teams mashed together and basically London Spitfire spent a lot of time trying to work out who they should play and who they shouldn't play, who's better and who's not. Obviously they offloaded Rascal and Fisher. Fisher, whether that was a good decision or not, you can make your own minds up on that, although I do think Gesture is a better tank than Fisher. Fisher just wants game time, and he deserves it because he is such a good tank. He doesn't deserve to be sitting on the bench at London Spitfire. They are now going to make some roster changes again. Now they're slightly different because obviously we're not in a transfer window right now, so they can't just be gotten rid of. They can't just be transferred. So they're going to become inactive. I'm going to call them AFK. So Spitfire are going to make 4 players from their roster AFK. So basically what's going to happen is they're going to be inactive, they're not going to be used, and at the end of the season they will be offloaded when their contracts run out. Whether that means they'll go to other Overwatch League teams, and I believe at least 2 of them could do that because they are good enough, or they'll go to contenders teams, or they'll go and just become inactive, maybe, I don't know. But the first one is TZ, who was the tank that they brought in to replace Fisher. He is now inactive on their roster, or AFK. He never got to play for the Spitfire. I'm not really surprised. I'm sure they would have included him by now if they thought he was good enough. Hureg, who was the DPS that flexed him for Birdring when Birdring had a wrist injury. He is now inactive and will not be used. AFK. I don't think Hureg was on the level of Spitfire's 2, star DPS players in terms of Prophet and Birdring. I really don't think Hureg is a top DPS in terms of being a top team. He couldn't compete with the NYXL DPSs. He would be more suited to a lower level team. Whether that be a low level Overwatch League team or a contenders team, I don't know. Here's the 2 big uns. Hagapan, who I think is easily an Overwatch League player, and I think you might see him on another Overwatch League roster somewhere. And remember, there may be more teams coming in next season. It's highly likely anyway. So Spitfire favoured Badosin over Hagapan, which I can think we kind of understand. Badosin is a nutty Zen, not quite Jonak sort of style, but he is a nutty Zen Badosin. And Huyol, the flex tank, the Diva player, or your, I don't know, Zarya player. Huyol is a very good flex. A very good flex. They've chosen Fury over Huyol, but I think Huyol could find another Overwatch League team to play for. Who that would be, we don't quite know. There are a lot of good flex tanks in the Overwatch League, so it might be perhaps a new team that will come into the league. Perhaps you'll see Huyol and Hagapan go to the same team next season, you don't know. So, this brings Spitfire's active roster down to 7. Birdring, Prophet, Fury, Gesture, Closer, Badosin and Nuss. Obviously they have 3 supports, 1 main tank, 1 flex and 2 DPS. So if they do get injuries, Birdring's had an injury recently, then they don't really have a replacement. But I think it's Spitfire trying to whittle down the roster and try and concentrate more on a solid roster than chopping and changing all the time, which has created some inconsistency. If you look at NYXL, they have a consistent roster that they play most of the time. Yeah, they may swap Pine in for Sabiobi or Libero every now and then, but it's mainly a core roster that they will play with. I could see London Spitfire perhaps signing another DPS player in the off-season, but that's something for the end of the season to be concerned with. Let's move on to our results for this week, week 2 of Stage 4. And the Boston Uprising have been on a bit of a downturn, haven't they? Yeah, Boston are in trouble, and I think the meta is affecting them like I expected it to. No Tracer means no carry. I hate saying that, but Striker carried Boston on Tracer by the looks of it, and this meta with Brigitte in it. It does not favour Tracer, it does not favour Boston. Although I did not expect them to lose to Dallas Fuel. Although, Dallas Fuel were one of the people who I expected to benefit from this meta. I thought they might benefit slightly but not be too outrageous with what they've done, but they have actually pulled some strings, you might say. And they're actually looking quite decent, Dallas Fuel, at the moment. A bit too little too late, but they're looking decent. They beat the Boston Uprising 3-0, Boston still without a win. Florida Mayhem are currently in a worse position than Shanghai in Stage 4. Yeah, they lose 3-1 to Valiant. At least they take a map, that's all I can say. I thought this would be a close game coming up. Houston Outlaws taking on Los Angeles Gladiators. Two teams that were on a pretty good record. But Gladiators seem to be that tier above Outlaws right now. They beat the Outlaws 3-1 and Gladiators remain unbeaten. London Spitfire. Coming into this week with a 0-2, losing to New York Excel and the Houston Outlaws in week 1 of this stage. Shock on the rise with some really good results in the previous stage and starting off this stage pretty well. But they do lose to London. It goes to 5 maps, but it's a 3-2 for London. London are starting to get back to not, I can't say stage 1 London, but perhaps stage 2 London. Stage 2 London wasn't quite as good as stage 1 London. Birdring is starting to play much better. You have to take that away from this week, and we'll talk about the Seoul game later on. Birdring is looking better than he was just before he left for his injury. And if they can get Birdring playing well again, Prophet's always fairly consistent, Gesture's fairly consistent, Fury will be fairly consistent, then your supports are fairly consistent, and all of a sudden you've got a team that can challenge NYXL like they did in Stage 1. So London are starting to get a bit of traction again. Then we move on to the Gladiators, taking on the Florida Mayhem. Again, no surprises, this is a 4-0. And the game afterwards, Fusion taking on the Shanghai Dragons, again a 4-0. And going back to Shock, Shock need to get some wins on the board because they are teetering on the edge of not being able to reach those season playoffs, but they were very, very far outsiders for it anyway. Moving on, we have the Boston Uprising in action again, this time against the Valiant. This is a bit more of a better showing from Boston, but Valiant aren't the most consistent of teams. They have their ups and they have their downs. They do beat Boston Uprising, but it is a 3-2. So if Boston can start perhaps getting a bit more traction, they only need 1 or 2 wins and they should be fine to get into the season playoffs. But as it stands, if they keep losing like they are, they might well fall out. They might well. And that would be a bit of a shocker. Obviously it depends on what Seoul and Houston do. Talking of Seoul, they had to take on the NYXL after that match. And we all know where Seoul are at the moment. They are not looking too good. They're stuck in a rut where they're not of the opinion that Miro is that good on main tank. They tried Rouge Hong on main tank. Then you've got this meta come balling through the door where Rouge Hong can't really play Reinhardt. He can play Winston, he can play Orisa, but he can't play Reinhardt. So you've got to bring Miro back in, and the supports needed help, so you had to put Rouge Hong back on the Zen. It's all a bit messed up for Seoul, and they lose 4-0 to the New York XL. Shock taking on Houston. Now this I thought would be closer, but Shock 4-0 the Houston Outlaws. This isn't good for Houston. This week has not been good for Houston. I think they should have perhaps at least picked up a win this week. Perhaps not over the Gladiators, but the Shock. They could have gone toe-to-toe with the Shock. So Houston, they had a good week 1, but their week 2 is a bit iffy. If they have a bad week next week, I think that's a rip on their season playoffs, to be quite honest with you, because the teams above them will stay ahead of them. I think if you get if you get some bad results next week. Seoul Dynasty in action again against the London Spitfire. Oh, Seoul, it's not been a good week, is it? Going up against the best team in the world, basically. We've got to say that Excel are the best team in the world. And then going against the team you just can't beat in London Spitfire. And they can beat them, and they lose 3-2 to Spitfire. It was actually a pretty close game. It was pretty close. It was closer than some people may have expected it to be. Seoul are 0-4 in stage 4. They are now 7th in the overall standings. Oh boy, we'll get onto the standings in a minute. New York Excel in action again against Shanghai. Again, no surprises here that NYXL 4-0 this. Shanghai now not winning maps. You might want to highlight. Very often they draw or win a map off of pretty much any team in the league, because they seem to do better when the pressure's not on them. But they've gone 4-0, lost 4-0 both games this week. Not good, not good at all. And then we are back to the Dallas Fuel, all the way around and back to the Dallas Fuel. Taking on a Fusion. This is an upset. Upset of the week, boys. Fusion have been looking decent. They haven't been looking fantastic. They haven't been looking awful. They've been looking decent. They've been looking like a season playoffs team. Fuel, however, I've got something to say about that. They want these stage 4 playoffs. They want a bit of cash in the bank. They 3-1 against the Fusion. A win for Fuel over the Fusion. Now, we wouldn't have predicted that a while ago, would we? Fuel are actually looking pretty decent in this stage. Obviously, as I said earlier, I think the meta does favour them. But it's pleasing to see Dallas Fuel have found a way of working. Obviously, they did sack Kai. They've got some new coaches in. I don't think Kai was ever the problem. Kai was a coach for Team USA in the World Cup who took who took careers so close on Hanamura. I remember that Hanamura game. And that will stay with me forever, that World Cup Hanamura game. So, Kai is not a bad coach. Although I think he's just gone to Houston, isn't he? Awkward. I don't think Kai is a bad coach. I just don't think the way Dallas were working things before worked. But it seems to be now perhaps clicking. Mickey's looking pretty good on the Brigitte at times. You've got Seoul, who can flex from DPS to Diva. And then you've got OG on the main tank role, who is a solid main tank. So things are looking up for Dallas Fuel. But it's time to look at those standings. And this is where it starts to get interesting. Our stage 4 standings are as follows. What a surprise. 2 4-0s this week and New York Excelsior are on top. Oh, I think it's going to be an NYXL seed 1 for this stage because they're looking too good. Although they are on equal records with the 2 LA teams, Gladiators and Valiant. Although their differential does not quite add up to what Excelsior have. If we have a Gladiators Excelsior game this stage, which I believe we probably do, I just don't know what week it is, we'll have a look at the fixtures in a minute, then that could be a crucial game for the stage. Currently propping up that 4th place and the last playoff place is the Philadelphia Fusion, with a 3-1 record. But they were beaten by the Dallas Fuel this week. Dallas Fuel are in 5th with a 3-1 record. They're just struggling to get those maps. Their map differential is not quite up to the pace of Philly Fusion right now, but Philly Fusion have been buffeted by 4-0 wins, obviously. Dallas Fuel, I don't think have to face NYXL this stage. So, it's entirely possible that Dallas Fuel could reach these stage playoffs. Entirely possible. San Francisco Shock are in 6th with a 2-2 record. They are joint on that 2-2 record with Houston Outlaws, who are in 7th, and London Spitfire, who are in 8th. London Spitfire have turned it around slightly, but they're going to need some wins next week if they want to try and get to those playoffs. Now you have 4 teams on 0 and 4. With a -8 differential, you have joint 9th Seoul Dynasty and the Boston Uprising. Didn't think I'd be saying that. And 11th you have Shanghai Dragons, not bottom, so that's a plus. Shanghai Dragons in 11th with a -12 differential, and then the Florida Mayhem in 12th with a -13 differential. Seoul and Boston have got some problems. Problems. And as we move into the overall standings, those problems are laid bare. Obviously, we have New York Excel on top. They have over 100 map wins. So, that's pretty frightening, and 31 wins on the board is still quite frightening. They could reach a +100 differential by the end of this stage. London Spitfire have regained the 2nd spot in the league. something they held earlier on this season but lost due to some poor performances in Stage 3. But they are on an equal map record, or win record, match record, whatever. 22 and 12, joint with the Los Angeles Valiant and the Boston Uprising. But the Boston Uprising are struggling for wins at the moment. And hot on the heels of the Boston Uprising in 5th are the Philadelphia Fusion with a 21 and 13 record, and not far off the differential either. Gladiators are on a 20 and 14 record in a last season playoff place in 6th. Now we have the team that can't win, Seoul Dynasty, in 7th with a 19 and 15 record. As I said earlier, Seoul need to start picking up some wins, otherwise they might not just find themselves out of the stage playoffs, they might find themselves out of the seasonal playoffs, which, to be quite honest, would be amazing. And not for a good reason. Seoul were almost nailed on at the start of this season to be in those playoffs, and to find them in 7th is something else. Houston Outlaws are in 8th with an 18 and 16 record, still very, very capable of winning, coming back and getting into those seasonal playoffs. But the team that are currently very, very rank outsiders are San Francisco Shock. There are 6 games left of the stage. Shock need 6 wins to get into those season playoffs, and they need Gladiators and Seoul and Houston to lose. I don't think it's going to happen, Shock. And it's such a shame, because if you had have had your roster, I'm talking about Super and Sinatra, if you had have had your roster from the start of the season, I really do think Shock would have been in those season playoffs. I really do think so. Dallas Fuel, obviously on a turnaround, they're on 9 wins now. In that 10th place. Florida Mayhem in the 11th place, and now with a minus 100 map differential, we have Shanghai in 12th. Still with no wins on the board. Florida Mayhem have also lost 100 maps, by the way. So, it's looking interesting. London could get 100 map wins this stage as well. It's actually very easy to get 100 map wins for London, especially if they reach the stage playoffs. They should have it anyway. So, that's your overall standings, that's your stage standings. Now let's have a look at the fixtures for next week, which can be very, very crucial. New York Excel taking on the Philly Fusion. It's a difficult week for the Philly Fusion. Thursday, May the 31st at 12 AM. Now, Excel are going to be backed for this one as, we know, favourites, although Philly Fusion do have the ability to take down the Excel. The thing is with Philly, is they need to take down the XL, because they got people hot on their heels in the season playoffs, they got people hot on their heels for the stage playoffs, and they're quite capable of going 0-2 this coming week. So I'm going to back an XL win, but it's a big week for Philly Fusion. At 2 AM you have the Seoul Dynasty taking on the Shanghai Dragons. You've got to say this should be Seoul's first win of stage 4. If it isn't, then Shanghai have won their first game and Seoul are in serious problems. Yeah, it's got to be a Seoul win. I can't say anything else. At 4 AM we have the LA derby between Valiant and Gladiators. Oh, it really could go either way, but I think Gladiators might edge it slightly. Sorry, Valiant, but I think Gladiators, even though the places in the leagues are not exactly favouring Gladiators, I think Gladiators might win it. On Friday, the London Spitfire are in action again at 12 AM. They will be taking on the Boston Uprising. Now, Boston beat London last stage. Can they do it again this stage? It's looking unlikely, but you never know what London are going to turn up. If London are starting to find their form again, then it may just be easy for London, but you never know. At 2 AM, you had the San Francisco Shock taking on the Dallas Fuel. This is a big match in terms of stage playoffs, obviously. If Shock want to get there, Shock have to win. If Fuel want to get there, Fuel have to win. And a win for Fuel, or Shock could see them, especially, no, I think it's just Fuel actually. A win for Fuel could see them overtake Fusion, especially if Fusion lose to the Excel, which we're expecting them to. At 4 AM, you had the Philadelphia Fusion with their second difficult game of the week against the Los Angeles Gladiators. Again, I can't see past the Gladiators for this one. I think their tank play is just a bit better than the Fusion. It's a difficult one. It's a very difficult one. It could be quite a close match. It could be 5 maps. But I gotta back Gladiators for that one. On Saturday, you have at 12 AM the Houston Outlaws taking on the Shanghai Dragons. This should be a return to form for the Houston Outlaws, and it should be a win. If Shanghai win that one, I'll eat my hat. At 2 AM, you have the Florida Mayhem taking on the Seoul Dynasty. Again, it's a very, very easy week for Seoul. They should be able to pick up 2 wins this week and get themselves back in the running for the season playoffs. If they don't get 2 wins this week, I'll be very, very surprised. But again, it's winnable games for Shanghai and Florida if they play like they can do, but they very often don't. They play to their opposition and then the opposition win. So I think Seoul are going to go 2-0 in week 3. At 4 AM, you have the Boston Uprising in action again against the San Francisco Shock. Again, if Boston haven't improved, then you've got to see Shock win this, and Boston go 0-2 this week, and they'll be 0-6 in the stage. And then they'll be looking at perhaps 6th, 7th place and in the overall standings, and then you're starting to get a bit nervous if you're an Uprising fan, and I do not envy you. At 9 PM on the same day, you have the London Spitfire. They're taking on the informed Dallas Fuel. This could actually be really close. It's kind of a must-win game for London, but it's also kind of a must-win game for Dallas, so it's going to be real close. Both teams are going to be going ham, but it'll either be a stomp by Spitfire, but I'm expecting it to be quite close. And if it goes to map 5, it really could go either way. I know map 5 is not Oasis, so it's a ball in this stage, so it does favour Spitfire a bit more, but it really could go either way. It really could. At 11 PM, you have the Excelsior taking on the Los Angeles Valiant. This should be an Excel win, but Valiant could take them quite close. Valiant are no shabby team, so Excelsior shouldn't be taking that for granted, but I think Excel should win this one. And at 1 AM, you had the Florida Mayhem taking on the Houston Outlaws. Again, Houston have the same fixtures as Seoul this week coming up, and Houston should be able to go 2-0 this week, and if they don't, then yeah, they need to look at themselves, because Florida and Shanghai are not looking good right now. Worse than Seoul and Houston are looking anyway. And that is the fixtures for week 3 in stage 4. This will be our halfway point in the stage. And we're now going to look very, very closely at the playoffs coming up. There is a lot at stake for these teams. I mean, a lot. An absolute incredible amount. I mean, it's insane. When you think about the money coming into esports now, I'm not going to get onto Fortnite, because that's just a ridiculous amount of money going into esports. So, there we are. I think we're going to see wins for Seoul, we're going to see wins for Houston, and we're going to see wins for Excel, obviously. A tough week for Fusion coming up, and a bit of a teller week for London if they want to try and get to those stage playoffs. But, for now, thank you guys so much for joining me with this video, and I will see you next week. See you then!